Outside the Commons with a group of MPs. David.
Gary, thank you very much indeed. As we heard there, a variety of subjects raised at Prime Minister's Question Time, but the tone to some extent set by events in Paris which were just unfolding as Prime Minister's Question Time got underway this lunchtime, and it's on that subject that we will begin. I'm pleased to say I'm joined by three Scottish MPs, Alan Reid for the Liberal Democrats, Tom Greatrix for Labour and Angus MacNeil for the SNP. Alan Reid, I think everyone would condemn what has happened in Paris today unreservedly, but it's a new type of terrorism, isn't it?
Oh, it's a terrible thing to happen. It's an appalling event, and my sympathies go to the relatives and friends of the victims. But yes, it's an attack on freedom of speech, which is one of the cornerstones of our society. And the terrorist attack, it just shows how vulnerable we all are to that sort of thing. It's a very worrying development.
Tom Greatrix, this wasn't sort of a random attack. It seemed very much as though those who were attacked had been targeted by these terrorists.
It certainly sounds like that from the reports that we've had, and particularly that 4 of the 12 are cartoonists, I think indicates that. And I think, as Alan said, that's something which is an attack on free speech, and it's something which you need to be very wary of, getting to a situation where free speech is compromised in that way. And we obviously need to think about what that means in terms of security implications, not just obviously in France, but around the world as well.
Indeed, Angus MacNeil, if it could happen in Paris, it could happen anywhere. It could happen in London or Edinburgh, couldn't it?
Absolutely, it could happen anywhere. This really was multiple assassinations, and as you said, it is a new type of terrorism that's come about. Before, in the past, we've been used to mass, random, brutal events, if you like, and this is a very targeted, brutal event, and just its barbarity, I think, is shocking. But the nature of it and the new nature of it is the bit that's chilling. And as Tom and Alan have said, it is an attack on our society, but also there will be security implications inevitably after this. For people particularly who are involved in publishing of this kind.
Let's move on now to domestic politics. Very much a feeling at Westminster as we've come back this week that the election campaign, the gun has not been started, but it is well and truly underway. Alan Reid, it very much had the feeling today of it, particularly with the health service, and the Prime Minister was keen to say that this applied to the whole of the United Kingdom, not just England, that this is going to be one of the key issues.
Yes, the health service and the problems at A&E throughout the UK is clearly a very important issue that we have to get to the bottom of. But as the Prime Minister pointed out, it's happening in all 4 countries of the UK. It's not a party political issue. It seems to be that there's been a much greater demand on the health service over the last few weeks, and looking at it, it seems to be a combination of, well, first of all, we're a much older society, far more elderly people. Seems to be a lack of availability of GPs out of hours, and also delayed discharges, also called bed blocking, where people who should be in a care home or at home with a care package are still in hospital. So I think all 4 governments in the UK have to examine their health services and get to the bottom of how we can stop this crisis happening every winter.
Tom Greatrix, it is apparent that there is no one single cause of this, is there? It's a multifactorial cause to the problems we're suffering with the health service.
Well, there are a number of issues that are relevant to this, but in relation to England, particularly the issues around the way in which the reorganisation of the health service has happened in the last few years has certainly not helped. There's also an attitudinal thing here around the way in which people tend to use A&E services, which is tied up with some of the issues around out-of-hours GP care, and that's as much an issue in Scotland as it is in England as well. Particularly, I know from my own constituency casework, the number of people who are waiting a long time for an accident emergencies in Lanarkshire, and who are struggling to get out-of-hours GP care as well across the whole of Scotland. So there are big issues there for the Scottish Government as well.
Angus MacNeil, it was interesting that David Cameron said this applies to all 4 parts of the United Kingdom, and then getting a little bit political, he said, but of course England is doing better than Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
Well, he started off calling the NHS, and it was barracking from the SNP that made him change that tone, because David Cameron, when he talked about the NHS, he was talking about the NHS in England, and Ed Miliband, was in the same zone with him. They then expanded out a little further. He made the political point that where Labour run the NHS in Wales, it's even worse still. And I would disagree with him. I would say it's better in Scotland. But we are then party politicising what really is a seasonal issue with other underlying causes that have been mentioned as well. But I do think that when Miliband and Cameron are together talking about the NHS, they should be specific about which NHS they're talking about, or are they talking about all 4 NHSs? In the beginning, he wasn't specific.
But it's a key fact, isn't it? Whoever is the government of the day when there's a problem with the NHS, whether it be in England, Scotland, Wales or Northern Ireland, is likely to get the blame?
To an extent, yes, and I think we have to be glad in Scotland that several accident emergencies were kept open when the SNP came in 2007. Labour and the Liberals were planning to close some, so we have to be glad that didn't happen.
But we've got a real issue in A&Es in Scotland currently struggling to cope with the demand, and there are real issues about the ability of the NHS in Scotland to stand up to that resource. And when we've had a situation in Scotland where there's been a real terms cut in NHS funding in Scotland, even in comparison to England, that's something which is right. It's the responsibility of the Scottish Government. I think they should be doing much better on that.
Well, I think this should not be a party political bun fight, because all four NHSs in the UK are all facing exactly the same problem, and I think we should be getting together and trying to work out solutions rather than just using it as an election issue.
Something that is going to be party political, the fall in the price of oil. The Prime Minister today, Alan Reid, was very quick to say that the UK was better and Scotland benefited because the UK could take shocks when the oil price comes down.
Oh yes, the Prime Minister's perfectly correct there, and the fall in the oil price since the referendum just shows what a narrow escape we had. I mean, had there been a yes vote in the referendum, we'd be facing complete economic meltdown now with the fall in the oil price. I mean, the fall in the oil price, it practically wipes out the Scottish education budget, and of course it's not just if we went independent. If we had also accepted the SNP submission to the Smith Commission for full fiscal autonomy, we would have faced exactly the same problems. So yes, we're far better off within the UK, by the fall in the price of oil can be shared across the whole UK.
Tom Greatrix.
Well, I think the issues here are not just about the impact in terms of price on consumers, but the impact particularly in Aberdeen, and a potentially significant impact, because even before the recent sudden decline in the oil price, we had the Wood Review, which was pointing out that very much that the North Sea is a mostly mature basin. It's very challenging economically for companies to be able to make money out of the North Sea, and that has its own implications in terms of jobs and growth in the North East. Now that has come into really stark focus in the last few days, and there is a lot that the UK government can do and the Scottish government could be doing on that issue. And one of the first things that should be in place is to make sure that the Wood Review is properly implemented, and the legislation currently in front of this Parliament is implemented to ensure that the new Oil and Gas Authority can get up and running, and that's something we should all be committed to.
Final brief word to you, Angus McNeill. It was a close shave.
Absolutely not. I mean, I'm wondering if Alan Reid is serious at all in what he's saying, or understands the issues involved. I mean, oil was an extra in the Scottish economy. Our GDP is about the same size per capita as the rest of the UK. Oil was a bonus. Now, if he wants to look at what some of the industry complain about, it's the changes of these two governments when they're in power, Liberals and Labour, to the oil regime. We look at Norway, $580 billion oil fund providing £17 billion each and every year, even if there's no oil. We've been failed in Scotland by Westminster, running off with their oil and not investing for the future.
There's an oil fund in Scotland set up on the same basis as Norway in 1990. There'll be nothing in it now.
We will have to leave it there, gentlemen. This is a topic somehow I think we will come back to before May the 7th. Angus McNeill, Tom Greatrix and Alan Reid, thank you very much. Gary.